This event happened when I was maybe 3 years old. My mom was cleaning around the house when I came out of my room and asked her to come to the bathroom with me because I had to potty and there's a man in there. So she went with me and she couldn't see anyone, but she asked me to describe the man. I told her the man was a policeman. She asked me what color his uniform was because she knew the colors worn by the different law enforcement agencies. There's Sheriff Department, local police, and highway patrol, of course. Before I was born, I should note that my mother had been a dispatcher and deputy for the Sheriff's Department where we lived in Northern California. I said the man's uniform was tan, which meant highway patrol. As we left the bathroom, I pointed into my bedroom and said, "There's another one in there." I described how the men had been shooted with a shoot gun, one in the elbow and stomach, one in the knee, as well as other places. I don't remember exactly where, unfortunately. From the fact that 2 murdered CHP officers appeared to be hanging around in her house, my mom knew who they had to have been. After all, she didn't know very many people who had been murdered. I'm not writing their names because I don't know if there could be an legal fallout from doing so. I can't think why there would be, but just to be on the safe side. Some time passed and my mom told the story to a friend of hers who still worked for the Sheriff's Department. The fact that one officer had been shot in the elbow was one of the details that was withheld from the public as the cops investigated the crime. Even my mother hadn't known about that. But because of that, she was able to confirm her guess about the identities of the dead officers. On December 22nd, 1978, the 2 officers, one of them a friend of my mother's, had made a vehicle stop on a stolen car. The drivers somehow managed to get control of their weapons, shot one in the knee and one in the elbow, disabling them, and killed both of them with their own service revolvers. The officers were not expecting a fight and were caught off guard, and theirs was the only CHP car in the county that night, due to state-mandated cutbacks and nightmare patrols. At the time I saw the ghosts, the case would have been just going to trial. The murdered family. I lived in an old 2-story house. I did not like it there. I just felt like there was a presence watching me in my bathroom and room. By the way, the house is made of wood. I see just for a second a shadow running across the room and into the bathroom. All my stuff is misplaced all the time. It's frightening. So I did some research and found out a horrible murder took place here. A family of 3 was murdered here in the room and bathroom. It seems that the father of a poor family made an enemy of a mean neighbor. One day, the father humiliated the neighbor in front of a town not far from the house. The neighbor was, of course, very mad. At night, the neighbor snuck into her house. He grabbed a knife and slit the father's throat in the same bed I sleep in. His son came in there wondering what the noise was all about. When he saw his father dead, he screamed. The scream woke the mother. The neighbor cut the boy in the chest and killed him. The mother fled to the bathroom and locked the door. When the killer got in, he stabbed the mother repeatedly. There was blood all over the place. The neighbor was scared, so he committed suicide. When I told my parents, they were shocked. So 1 week later, we moved to Texas. I'm glad I am out of that house, but it was pretty interesting. I was 15 then, and now I'm 31. Murdered friend is still about. I find it strange that I'm sharing a story that is so personal to me, but I would just like to get some understanding from it. I come from Manhattan, and I'm still currently living there. It starts from 2002 when my father, brought up in the Bronx, but moved to the Upper East Side, decided to give back to his community, since it has, he says, made him who he is today. He set up a graffiti club, as I should put it, where kids in rougher neighborhoods could come off and get off the streets and express their emotions through their art. It was pretty successful, some trouble here and there, but overall it went pretty great. I decided to go, of course, and I befriended some people who, if it wasn't for the club, I would never have thought they'd be friends with me. Cut the long story short, I really got on with Jay. Jay, not his real name, but for privacy's sake, with whom I could have so many laughs with. Tragically, in early 2003, he was shot down in Harlem, where he came from. It was a tragic blow to the club and me personally. It affected me more than I could ever explain. It hurts and still does now just to think about him. I visited the spot a few weeks later. I bent down and cried with my head in my hands. As I did, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I heard a laugh, then a mumble I will never even make out myself. But I think it sounded like, "Don't cry about me" or something. I thought I was a respectful person, yet seconds later when I stood and turned, nobody was there. I wasn't frightened. I just assumed it was someone who walked off fast. Driving back home, still crying, I stopped at a light. I wiped my eyes and looked out the driver's window at some girls playing double dutch. On the steps of the building beside them, I could have sworn I saw Jay. I was so convinced that I shouted his name. The kids were bewildered at who I was shouting at, and the man I saw didn't even look towards me. His eyes just stayed fixated somewhere over the top of the car. I drove off fast, sure that I was going crazy. It wasn't until the club stopped in 2005 that strange things happened once again. As I prepared food in the kitchen, my music player blasted a Tupac song. I think it's called Hold Your Head. It was an album from the Don Killuminati, the 7-Day Theory, which Jay persuaded me to buy, but I'd never listened to it since the day I'd buy it. This overwhelming feeling of happiness came over me, even though I knew I should be scared as for how a CD had got out of my bedroom closet into the stereo in my living room and then played by itself. I walked into the living room, smiling and silently laughing, and then I heard a laugh, very loud, coming from by the hallway. I then became scared, even though I was so familiar with that laugh. I just stood there, burst into tears, and that feeling, that gutted feeling I felt all those years ago. That night, as I got into my bed, my bedroom door opened. Thinking it was my cat, I got up and closed it, of course. Now this is the part that I find so unbelievable and disturbing to think about. Halfway down the hallway, a figure stood, just dark with no features at all. It stood directly in front of a picture Jay and another kid had created. For about a minute I stood there bewildered, too scared to move, staring at the figure that barely moved. Then I just slammed my door, ran to my bed like a child. Since then, I've never seen anything like that, but sometimes I don't feel alone in my home, and channels on TV have the tendency to switch to certain music channels. I've never told anybody except my best friend and my father. On here, I'm hoping people are more open-minded and help me understand what happened. Even though I never believed in the paranormal, I really do think Jay is around me at times, which makes me feel so happy to know. It really does scare me, the idea of a ghost, but if it is of Jay, I know he's only there to joke around and just see if I'm okay. But I can't help thinking that people become ghosts on Earth because they are stopped from going into the afterlife, because they have some unfinished business to attend to. Thank you for allowing me to share the story, which has been bothering me for so long. The Ghost Girl in the Mirror. This is a true story that happened when I was around 11 years old. It is so far the only ghost experience I have ever had, but it is one of the scariest moments ever. I was in middle school when this whole experience occurred. We have 2 bathrooms for girls and boys, the downstairs bathrooms and the upstairs ones. Everyone knows about the upstairs girls' bathroom. The reason is, whenever you go in there, you always feel really weird. It feels cold, and basically just gives you a feeling of distortion. Because I was with the older students, all our classes were upstairs. So if we needed the toilet, we had to use the upstairs ones. Anyway, one lesson, I needed to go really bad. I had no choice but to use the bathroom upstairs. I walk into the girls' bathroom and immediately get that familiar sense of disorientation. I rush into the cubicle, all the while feeling this freezing cold energy. Despite it being a lovely warm day, my heart was pounding. The feeling of panic was rising. I just wanted to get out of there quickly. I opened the cubicle door and headed for the sinks. Even though I was terrified, I was still a freak about germs. I quickly washed my hands and glanced at the mirror in front of me. My heart literally stopped. My eyes went wide. In the mirror's reflection, I kid you not, was a young girl right beside me. She was turned to the left, making a clapping gesture with her hands and eyes closed. I only saw her for about 2 seconds before I shot out of there, screaming. I assure you, I was the only one in there the entire time. The bathroom door is a very large one. You can certainly hear it if someone comes in or leaves. When I first entered, the room was empty, and all the cubicle doors were swinged open. So I am positive nobody was in there but me. Besides, when I left the cubicle, it was still empty. I only saw this girl in the reflection. I never went to that bathroom again, and now I moved up to high school. My friend has a familiar experience in the same bathroom, but that's for another day.